"You're too poor and embarrassing," my sister sneered in front of everyone at her birthday dinner. "I can't waste my time with you. I have an elite circle, now get lost." Then she found out I was worth $200 million. My name's Cecilia Reynolds. I'm 29 years old. The doorman at the Alastair, the city's temple of manufactured exclusivity, didn't recognize me. That was the point. His eyes, trained to spot designer bags and last season's couture, slid right over my simple navy dress, something I'd picked up at a department store sale rack. It was functional, unremarkable, and utterly invisible to a man whose job was to see and be seen by the right people. No labels, no pretense. In my hand, I held a bouquet of supermarket carnations, their plastic wrapper crinkling softly with each step I took on the marble floor. The sound was cheap, out of place in the hushed opulence of the lobby. It was a deliberate choice. A calculated insult addressed directly to my sister, Ava Reynolds, though she wouldn't understand its true meaning until it was far too late. Ava's 30th birthday party was designed to be an exercise in exclusion, a carefully curated performance of her social ascent. My invitation wasn't an act of sisterly affection, it was a prop. I was cast as the before picture, the family footnote she was forced to include out of some lingering, inconvenient sense of obligation. I was the drab, gray backdrop against which her own vibrant success could shine all the brighter. I walked past the velvet rope, a barrier Ava worshipped as if it were the gate to heaven itself. The hostess, a young woman with a practiced, indifferent smile, barely glanced up from her reservation list. "Reynolds' party," I said quietly. She ticked a box and gestured vaguely toward a grand, arched doorway. "Through there." I saw the cameras first, not just phones, but a professional videographer circling the room like a shark, his lens glinting in the low light. Perfect. Witnesses were essential. The private dining room was overflowing with white roses, their cloying scent thick in the air, mixing with the expensive perfume of Ava's court. Her laughter, high and sharp, echoed off the crystal chandeliers. She was holding court in the center of the room, a queen on her throne, surrounded by friends like Simone Park, a woman who measured her own worth in followers and brand sponsorships. Their parents were there too, men and women who measured it in stock portfolios and summer homes in the Hamptons. They were all part of the same ecosystem, one that ran on status and visibility. My parents, Linda and Mark Reynolds, were there, standing near Ava, beaming with a pride that was almost painful to watch. They saw her performance of success, her glittering dress and easy confidence, but they never saw the cost, the wreckage she left in her wake. They only saw the finished product, the daughter they had polished and perfected. Ava spotted me then. Her brilliant smile tightened at the edges for a fraction of a second. She waved me over, a flick of her wrist that was more of a dismissal than a welcome. "Cecilia, you came." Her eyes dropped to the flowers in my hand. "And you brought that." She gestured to the carnations, and a soft ripple of laughter went through her friends. Simone covered her mouth with a perfectly manicured hand, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "How quaint," she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. Ava pointed me to a seat at the far end of the long, formal table, next to a distant cousin I don't think anyone had spoken to in years. Maximum distance from the center of power, but maximum visibility for the cameras. A perfect shot of the poor, forgotten sister. I took my seat without a word. My role tonight was to be small, to be a ghost at the feast, and I played it perfectly. I placed the cheap bouquet on the table, a splash of garish color on the pristine white linen. The first motif was planted, the first brick laid. The closed door, the gate. For her entire life, Ava had been the gatekeeper. Tonight, I was bringing my own key. My dad caught my eye from across the table and gave me a little nod, a silent plea: "Just be pleasant. Don't make waves, it's her night." He meant well, but his desire for a smooth, conflict-free evening was the very thing that had allowed Ava's cruelty to flourish for decades. My mom was already deep in conversation with Simone's mother, likely recounting Ava's latest triumph at her marketing firm. My existence, my life across the country, was an inconvenient footnote to their grand narrative of family success. I was the quiet, strange daughter who played with computers while Ava conquered the world. The second motif became clear as I watched my sister, visibility. Ava preened for the cameras, laughing a little louder when the lens was on her, adjusting the straps of her designer dress, making sure her best angles were always captured. She was creating a memory, a piece of evidence to post online that would scream to the world, "I have arrived, I am important." I watched the staff. The way the lead server, a woman named Maria Alvarez according to her name tag, moved with a quiet efficiency that spoke of years of practice. The way the general manager, a man named Oliver Grant, stood near the doorway, his eyes missing nothing, his posture a study in trained, neutral observation. He saw everything from a crooked fork to a guest's empty water glass. Ava didn't see them as people. To her, they were extensions of the service she was owed, invisible machinery that made her night perfect. She clicked her fingers to get a waiter's attention, a gesture of pure, unadulterated arrogance that made me clench my fists under the table. This was the system I was here to break. This was the confrontation I had been moving toward my entire adult life, not by screaming or making a scene, but by letting her build the stage for her own spectacular downfall. Every condescending glance, every dismissive word was just more fuel for the fire I was about to light. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for her to step in it. The appetizers arrived on heavy ceramic plates, little works of art that were photographed by half the table before anyone took a bite. Ava began her performance in earnest, launching into a story about a recent trip to Monaco where she'd supposedly run into a minor European royal. The story was embellished, of course, polished to a high shine for this audience. She paused, then glanced down the long table at me, her expression a perfect mask of feigned interest. Of course, some of us are more focused on simpler things. Right, Cecilia, Simone Park giggled on cue. It's so sweet you still have hobbies, sis. What is it you do again, coding or something? My hobby had just made me a multimillionaire, but they didn't know that. To them, my life was a blank slate upon which they could project their pity and feel better about their own choices. My career was an amusing little pastime like knitting or collecting stamps. I just smiled faintly and took a sip of water. My silence was my shield, but they saw it as my surrender. My mom jumped in, her voice bright with the practiced cheer she used whenever she felt the need to smooth over one of Ava's barbs. Cecilia has always been our practical one, so grounded. It wasn't a compliment, it was a label, a neat little box to keep me in. It meant, don't expect too much from her, her ceiling is low. Dad nodded in enthusiastic agreement, relieved that a scene had been avoided. That's right, not everyone is meant for the spotlight like your sister. Ava soaked it in, a flower turning toward the sun. This was her narrative, the one our family had carefully constructed for 30 years. She was the star and I was the stagehand, existing only to make her look good. My role was to be the stable, boring one so she could be the exciting, successful one. We were a matched set. My tactic tonight was simple: absorb, don't push back, don't argue. Let her show everyone at this table exactly who she is without any interference from me, but my quietness didn't read as strength to them. It registered as defeat. My lack of a reaction wasn't seen as strategic patience. It was seen as an invitation to push harder, to see how far she could go before I finally broke. We were just talking about the new membership tier at the Sky Lounge, she said, her voice rising in volume, ensuring the whole table could hear. The Sky Lounge was the members-only club on the roof of this very building, a place whose exclusivity Ava fetishized. Victor Hale, the chair of the board, is sponsoring me himself. We had drinks last week. She looked directly at me, a challenge in her eyes. It's a different world, Cecilia, you wouldn't understand. It's not about what you do, it's about who you know, it's about building a network. The irony was a sharp, private pleasure that I had to hide behind a neutral expression. I knew Victor Hale. I'd had coffee with him just last week. He worked for me now. She was trying to put me down by using a system she didn't understand. a world whose rules she thought she had mastered. She was bragging about knowing the butler to the person who owned the entire estate. My lack of a verbal fight made her believe she was winning. In her world, the loudest person, the one with the most impressive names to drop, always won. My silence was her victory lap. Later, as the main courses were being considered, she asked the videographer to get a shot of the whole family. It was a command, not a request. He dutifully circled the table to get the best angle. As he framed the shot from across the room, Ava, who was sitting 2 seats away from Mom, subtly leaned forward, laughing at something Dad said. Her shoulder and an elaborate, feathery hairpiece she was wearing completely and totally obscured me from the camera's view. It was a trick from childhood, one she had perfected over years of school pictures and holiday photos. Erase, 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 make me disappear. My dad saw it. I saw his eyes flicker from the camera to Ava, and for a moment he started to say something. Ava, honey, maybe just, but Mom, ever the peacekeeper, put a restraining hand on his arm and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. The message was clear: don't ruin Ava's night, it's not important. The cost was small but deeply, publicly symbolic. I was literally erased from the family picture on the night of my sister's 30th birthday. A few of the guests noticed. I saw the quick, sympathetic glances from across the table, the slight winces from people who knew exactly what had just happened. But no one spoke up. Defending me was not worth the social price of crossing Ava Reynolds. They were here to celebrate her, not to correct her. My options were narrowing, just as I had planned. The path forward was becoming a tight channel. The energy in the room shifted as the main course was served. The toasts were about to begin, the main event of the evening. Ava was glowing, triumphant. She had successfully established the pecking order for all to see. I was the dirt, she was the diamond. My phone, which was face down in my lap, vibrated. I glanced down. It was a text from Natalie Brooks, my best friend and the only person on earth who knew what was about to happen. Showtime soon. You got this? I felt a flicker of the old, familiar anger, the hot sting of being misunderstood and chronically undervalued. It was a feeling I knew as well as my own heartbeat. But I pushed it down, compressing it into a tiny, hard diamond of resolve in my chest. Emotion was a liability tonight. The plan required absolute calm, the cold precision of a surgeon. Ava was walking right into the crosshairs I had spent months building. She thought she was boxing me in, making my world smaller with every insult and every act of erasure. In reality, she was just narrowing my path to the exact exit I had built for myself. This wasn't new. This feeling, this casual erasure, was a pattern polished by decades of practice. It started long before guest lists and exclusive clubs. It started with a science fair project. I was 12 and I had spent 6 months of my life building a working model of a miniature hydroelectric dam for the state science fair. It was my passion project. I read books from the library, taught myself basic wiring, and stayed up late in the garage soldering circuits until my fingers were sore. I wrote the 30-page research paper that went with it, meticulously citing every source. It was the most complex and ambitious thing I had ever created. Ava, who was 14, had a project on the effect of different genres of music on plant growth. It was a classic, low-effort project, and predictably all her plants had died a month before the fair. The night before we were due to set up our displays, she came into my room, her eyes red from crying. Her project was a total failure, she wailed. Mom and Dad would be so disappointed in her. She begged me, pleaded with me to let her present my project with me. She said it would be a testament to family unity, a story about sisterly collaboration. I was a kid. I wanted to help my sister. I wanted to believe that her tears were genuine, that her request came from a place of desperation, not calculation. So I agreed. The next day at the fair, standing in the noisy, crowded gymnasium, she stood in front of my hydroelectric dam and presented it as if it were her own. She used the words I designed and my research and my hypothesis. When the judges came to our table and asked me a technical question about the voltage regulator I had built from scratch, she cut me off before I could answer. "My little sister helped with the construction," she said, patting my head with a sickeningly sweet smile. "She's great with her hands, but the concept was all mine." The judges, two middle-aged engineers, beamed at her. They saw a bright, confident young woman, an aspiring scientist. They saw me as the helpful little sister, the assistant. They gave her the blue ribbon. I was devastated. That night I tried to tell Mom and Dad what had really happened. I explained how she had taken all the credit, how she had lied to the judges. My dad, a man who hates conflict above all else, looked deeply uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Cecilia," he said finally, "you have to learn to share the credit. It's important to support your sister." My mom was more direct. She sat me down on my bed, her voice low and serious. "Ava needed this win," she told me, as if explaining a simple, unchangeable fact of nature. "Her confidence is so fragile. You're strong, Cecilia. You're strong enough to handle the disappointment." They weren't protecting her. They were enabling a thief. They were teaching her that she could take whatever she wanted from me and there would be no consequences. They chose the easier narrative, the one that required no difficult conversations. The brilliant, popular older daughter and the quiet, supportive younger one. My work, my passion, my success, it was all just raw material to be fed into the family's image-making machine with Ava as the public face. My pain wasn't a problem to be solved. It was an inconvenience to be managed and, if possible, silenced. I realized then, with the clarity that only a deep and profound injustice can bring, that my accomplishments would never truly be my own. They would always be a resource for the family to allocate as they saw fit. That was the day I stopped showing them my work. I started building things in secret. Years later, I thought I'd escaped that dynamic. I went to college on an academic scholarship they barely acknowledged. I moved across the country, putting 2,000 miles between me and that suffocating family narrative. I got a job at a small tech startup and it turned out I was good at it, really good. I was promoted twice in 3 years. I was building my own life on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued me for my mind. But every holiday, every obligatory weekly phone call, the dynamic snapped right back into place. It was like a gravitational pull I couldn't escape. Ava would belittle my job during Christmas dinner. "Still playing with computers, sis?" she'd ask with a laugh, as if I were still a child in the garage. My parents would ask if I was saving any money, their tone suggesting my career was no more stable than a childhood lemonade stand. My independence wasn't seen as success, it was seen as a strange, lonely choice. Why wasn't I finding a husband? Why wasn't I moving closer to home? My progress made me vulnerable in a new way. The more I achieved on my own, the more they treated me like a lost cause because my success wasn't something they could use or take credit for. They couldn't comprehend a world where I didn't exist solely in relation to Ava. The problem wasn't just Ava, it never was. The problem was the entire system my parents had built to protect her fragile ego. They were the soil, and she was the invasive weed that grew strong and tall by choking out everything else around her. I tried once to set a real boundary. I was preparing for a major industry conference, and I had created a presentation I was incredibly proud of. Ava, who worked in a tangentially related field, heard about it and demanded I send it to her so she could borrow some of my slides for a meeting of her own. I said no, a simple, firm no. She told our parents I was being selfish and unsupportive. My mom called me later that day, her voice tight with fury. "After everything we've done for you, you can't do this one small thing for your sister. She looks up to you." It was a lie so profound, so completely disconnected from reality that it was almost impressive. Ava had never looked up to me, she'd only ever looked down, scanning for things she could take. In that moment, I realized I could never win by arguing, I could never make them see the truth. The system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as it was designed. To change the outcome, I had to stop trying to fix the system. I had to break it entirely. The stakes sharpened in my mind. This wasn't just about getting an apology anymore, it was about taking back the narrative of my own life once and for all. My hobby, the thing my family dismissed as me just playing with computers, was a data compression algorithm I co-developed with two partners I'd met in a university computer science class. For 3 years after graduation, we worked out of a dusty garage, fueled by cheap pizza and the unwavering belief that we were onto something big. Our walls weren't decorated with posters. They were covered in whiteboards filled with complex equations and lines of code. When I tried to explain the concept to my dad during one of my visits home, his eyes glazed over within 30 seconds. He gave my shoulder a patronizing pat and said, "Well, as long as it makes you happy, honey." He had no interest in the details, in the intellectual challenge, in the potential it held. To him, it was just Sisai's little project. Ava once visited my small apartment in California and saw the whiteboards covering my living room wall. She took a photo with her phone and, without asking, sent it to the family group chat with the caption, "Sisai's crazy wall. Someone call a doctor, lol." Everyone thought it was hilarious. They saw my work as a quirky, harmless pastime, the adult equivalent of a complex Lego set. They never once asked about the business plan, the late-stage investors we were courting, or the grueling hours we were putting in. Their dismissiveness, once a source of deep pain, became my greatest gift. It kept them out of my way. It built a wall around my work that they had no interest in climbing. While Ava was curating her social life and angling for party invitations, I was building a company. My work was invisible to them, so it was safe. It was the one part of my life they couldn't touch, criticize, or try to take from me for their own benefit. They were so blinded by the world they understood status, parties, appearances, that they couldn't see the real power, the real value being built right under their noses. The first hard proof that they were wrong didn't come with confetti or balloons. It arrived as numbers in my online bank account on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Our company had been in talks for months, long, draining meetings where I learned how to keep my face still while other people tried to decide my worth. We fought for a deal that didn't sell our souls. The day it closed, my share, after all the cuts and taxes, was just over $200 million. I sat alone on my couch, still in sweatpants, as the late sun slipped between the buildings and turned my living room gold. My phone buzzed with messages from my co-founders, all caps, hearts, inside jokes. I wrote back a simple, "We did it," and then put the phone face down. The quiet in my apartment was loud. The number on the screen looked fake, like a joke, too many zeros to belong to a person who still bought oatmeal in bulk and poured coffee over the sink when it was a little too sweet. I didn't call my family. What would I say? Mom would ask if I was sure it wasn't a scam. Dad would tell me to save it as if I'd found $20 in the seat cushion. Ava would find a way to make it about her. This wasn't theirs. It wasn't for them to hold or reshape or post about with a cute caption. It was mine, born from years they had spent laughing at the whiteboards on my wall. I made pasta and ate it standing up at the counter. I washed the single bowl and set it on the drying rack. Then I leaned my forehead against the cool window and looked at the city lights like they were stars. People always say money changes you. They're right, but not how they think. It didn't turn me into a new person. It gave me permission to be the person I'd always been when nobody in my family was looking. For the first time, I had a resource they couldn't understand and therefore couldn't control. I wasn't going to buy a fancy car or move into some glass box above the clouds. I was going to buy something else entirely. I was going to buy a reckoning. A month later, Mom called on a Sunday like she always did. I answered while walking home from the grocery store, a carton of eggs tucked carefully under my arm. "We've booked a cruise," she announced, skipping hello. I could hear her excitement puffing the words. "Ava found a wonderful deal for the whole family. Your share for the ticket is $2,000. I need you to send it to her by Friday." There was no question in her voice. "No, do you want to go? No, does that fit your budget?" I stopped on the sidewalk, the paper bag soft against my wrist. A dog barked somewhere behind me. A bus hissed at the curb. For a heartbeat, the old script rose up, the one where I said yes and moved money and rearranged my life to make other people comfortable. No, I said. It came out calm, almost gentle. I surprised myself with how steady I sounded. There was silence on the line, the kind that swallows a room. What do you mean no? Mom asked, her voice sharp around the edges. I mean no. I'm not going and I'm not sending Ava any money. You can't be serious, Cecilia. Don't be difficult. It's a family trip. Your sister is doing all this work to plan it. I'm not going, I repeated. I let the words sit there. I didn't fill the space with excuses she could argue with. I didn't explain because explanations had always been used against me. I could feel my face getting hot, my heartbeat flicking fast in my throat, but my voice stayed even. Your father will be very disappointed, she tried. I know, well, she said, and the words snapped like a twig. If that's how you want to be, she hung up. I stood on the corner and exhaled. The eggs were still whole. The bag handles cut into my fingers. I walked the rest of the way home with a strange, bright feeling in my chest. It wasn't joy, it wasn't relief. It was the clean burn of a bridge finally set on fire. The idea arrived a week later like a seed that had been waiting for the right crack in the pavement. I was scrolling without thinking, the way you do when the day has drained you, when Ava's face filled my screen. She was in the lobby of the Alistair, turned just so, dressed in a white dress that matched the marble. The caption was a breathless plea to her followers for good vibes as she made moves with the club upstairs. She tagged the Sky Lounge in 3 different ways, the restaurant downstairs in 2. It was her whole identity, wrapped up in one building like a present she was desperate to unwrap. I looked up from my phone and out at the city. Somewhere in those lights was that exact building. If her entire life was pointed at that door, then that door was where I needed to stand. I did what I always do when something matters. I researched. I called Daniel Porter, the first investor who had ever believed in me when all I had were whiteboards and faith. He answered on the second ring like he always did. I told him I wanted to understand who owned the Alistair and the Sky Lounge, how it all worked. Within a day, I knew both were part of the same company, the Monarch Hospitality Group. On paper, it looked fancy. In reality, the press clippings were old and the stories I found between the lines were not pretty. Quiet notes about delayed bills, a string of managers who came and went, and a whisper on a business blog that they were looking for a partner with deep pockets. A ticking element slid into place. They needed a lifeline. I could be the hand that looked like help. I didn't want to join Ava's world. I wanted to own the stage she worshipped. I wanted to stand at the door she adored and decide who walked through. Daniel, I said over coffee that tasted like smoke, I want to get into the restaurant business. He didn't laugh. He looked at me the way he had looked at my first mock-up, careful, testing, curious. Tell me why, he said, so I did. I told him the clean, simple version, brand, service, value. I didn't tell him about the bouquet of carnations or the science fair blue ribbon. He didn't need to know the poetry. He only needed to know the plan. We sat down with a financial expert he trusted in a cramped conference room with a view of an alley and a door that stuck. The man slid papers toward me and talked in a steady voice. Monarch Hospitality Group had taken on too many loans. They were trying to look rich and had drained their pockets to do it. Most of their properties were tired and needed love they couldn't afford. The only things still shining were the Alistair and the Sky Lounge. Those two were carrying everything on their backs. To Ava, the building was a jewel. To me, it was a tall wall with cracks running through it. They're propped up by these 2 spots, the expert said, tapping the pages. Everything else drags them down. I didn't need every chart to see the picture. The company was a show horse that limped when the parade was over. The expert warned me that buying in would be risky and loud. It would mean putting a lot of my money into a business I didn't come from. He asked, "Is this just for fun, or are you expecting to make money?" The room was warm, even with the old air conditioner rattling in the window. I thought of Ava's hand blocking me from the camera. I thought of Mom's voice telling me to share the credit, to sit down, to be the good one. "This isn't for fun," I said. "It's a plan." Daniel held my gaze for a moment. He needed to hear steadiness, not anger. He must have seen what he needed because he nodded once. The expert kept talking, but inside something quiet and important clicked. The weakness was right there, hidden in plain sight under white roses and dim lights. If I stepped in smart and fast, I could take the lever in my hand. Daniel took me to lunch at a diner 2 blocks from his office where the coffee cups had hairline cracks and the pie case hummed. He cut his sandwich in half and slid a piece onto my plate without asking, like always. "If you do this," he said, "you won't be a ghost anymore. People will know your name. You'll be expected to show up. You'll be photographed. You'll get asked to host things. You'll be in their world." That was the point, but it was also the cost. I'd spent years keeping my head down so nobody could take anything from me. Now I was about to stand in the brightest part of the room. "I know," I said. He set down his fork. "And once you're in, you're in. You can't hide behind a screen. You'll have to make calls in person, fire people who need to go, back people who deserve it. It is not a hobby where you can clock out when you're tired." I thought of all the times I'd swallowed my words and let a different version of me walk around so other people wouldn't be uncomfortable. I thought of my own smallness practiced like a bad habit. I wasn't that person anymore. "I can do it," I said. It happened fast after that, papers thicker than my wrist, meetings with old men who smiled too wide. A series of signatures that made my hand cramp even though I'd trained for long, careful movements on a keyboard, not a pen. I moved the money where it needed to go. When I hit the final line and signed my name, I felt a strange, quiet shedding like a snake slipping out of a skin that had grown too tight. I wasn't just buying a piece of a company, I was buying the stage. I was taking the mic. There was no going back to the girl who kept her work in the shadows so nobody could steal it. I wasn't hiding anymore. If I wanted to stand at the door, I had to let everyone see me holding the key. The highest price wasn't the money. It was admitting that my family, the people who were supposed to care about me for me, were a lost cause. I'd spent years saving small, hopeful scraps like a squirrel with a pocket full of bright things. Maybe this birthday, maybe this graduation, maybe this big break. I kept waiting for the day when Mom would ask about my work because she wanted to understand, or Dad would brag about me to a friend because his chest was full. I kept waiting for a sister who would be my partner, not my rival. By choosing this, I was letting that fantasy go. I was choosing to become the villain in their story so I could finally be the hero in my own. I sat on my floor with the windows open and listened to cars whoosh by, the city breathing in and out. Grief came like a tide, then pulled away. Natalie came over with takeout and no makeup, which is how you know someone is truly your person. She kicked off her shoes and curled one leg under her on my couch. I told her everything, the numbers and the people and the plan, but also the parts that made my stomach twist. "What if I'm just like them?" I asked. "What if I'm just using a bigger stick to hit back?" "You're not destroying your family, sis," she said, pointing at me with a chopstick for emphasis. "You're showing them the bill for what they destroyed in you." I let that sit inside me. It fit. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about a boundary. It was about cause and effect. It was about making the world as honest in public as it was in my head. I washed our dishes by hand even though I had a dishwasher. The warm water and the simple task steadied me. I dried my hands on a towel and looked at my reflection in the dark window. My face was my own. "Okay," I said to the person in the glass. "Let's build the door." My goals shifted like a camera pulling focus. I didn't want a pat on the head or a reluctant "good job" at Thanksgiving. That was tiny and weak. I wanted something that couldn't be taken back the next day. I wanted to change the shape of the room. I was done asking for a seat at the table. I would buy the table, set the chairs, and write the guest list. I wanted Ava to feel, just once, the cold of a door shutting on her face. I wanted her to hear, in public, the word no. For years, my life had been built around keeping the peace, keeping quiet, letting people take. I was over it. If I was going to spend this kind of money and attention, I wouldn't spend it on stuff. I'd spend it on gravity. I'd move the center of the world she worshipped by an inch and then another until it belonged to me. The plan stopped being about a fight between sisters and became a simple, clear design. Restructure the people in charge, change the rules that guided the space. Use a moment she created her own party as the stage for the reveal, not to scream or demand, to state, to enforce. To show that kindness without a backbone is just fear wearing a soft sweater, I pictured the velvet rope she loved so much. She always stood just inside it, smiling, watching others wait. I would stand there instead, not to be cruel, but to decide who got in based on how they treated people, not on how many names they could drop. I would be the quiet gatekeeper. Calm, visible, final. The takeover wasn't a parade. It was a string of quiet moves you'd miss if you blinked. Daniel's team set up a path for my money so it didn't all point back to me on day one. We started by buying what the company owed. If you hold the bills, you get a say. Once we had that leverage, we made an offer to buy most of the company itself. They were tired, broke, and proud. Pride doesn't pay vendors. Our offer wasn't flashy, it was clean. They took it. My first board meeting felt like calling into a radio show. I joined by video with my camera off and my name hidden behind a bland label. A few voices were loud and defensive. They said things like brand and exclusivity as if those words were furniture you could lean on. I let them talk. When they ran out of buzzwords, I spoke. Start with the basics, I said. Who on the ground is good at their job? I asked for reports from each property. Who keeps guests coming back? Who treats staff with respect? Who just likes being in charge? It didn't take long to find the bright spot. The Alastair's general manager, Oliver Grant, sent in a weekly report that read like a captain's log. He had notes on training, on how to handle regulars who snapped fingers at servers, on which suppliers were cutting corners. He didn't whine or make himself a hero. He cared about the place, and more importantly, he cared about the people who made it run. I flagged his name in my notebook. The others who were cruising on old stories and famous last names, I made a separate list. I gave my first directive. We're raising standards, I said. If you roll your eyes at staff or treat guests like walking wallets, you won't last. A few board members shifted in their chairs at that. They were used to being flattered, not pushed. I didn't push hard, I didn't need to. A steady hand turns a wheel just fine. Behind the scenes, contracts were cleaned up. Lazy managers were nudged out. Good ones were given cover and room to work. And the crown jewel, the Alastair and the club upstairs, became my main stage. The lights weren't on me yet, they would be. While I was moving furniture behind the curtain, Ava was tap dancing on the front steps. She turned her campaign to get into the Sky Lounge into a daily show. I'd wake up to a ping and see her face under soft hotel lights, glossed lips, hand on a velvet rope as if it were already hers. She texted me a selfie from the lobby. Just had lunch with the events director, getting closer to that membership. Wish you could see this place, it's amazing. There was a winky face and a heart. She thought she was poking the quiet sister who lived in the dark with her strange computer toys. I looked at the photo and thought about the fact that the chair she was perched on was technically mine. I didn't write back. Another day, a video posted of her swirling a martini and talking about making moves while tag after tag stacked under the caption. She kept saying she was so close to the board. She name-dropped people she barely knew. She filmed hallways like they were sacred. Late on a Friday night, my phone lit up. Ava was drunk. I could hear the party in the background, the squeal of laughter, the clink of glass. Simone's dad is putting in a word for me, she said, her voice syrupy with smug joy. It's happening, sis, I'm going to be on the inside. There it was again, that word, inside. As if the point of life were always a door and a circle and never the human being standing in both places. That's great, I said, and meant nothing by it. She had no idea she was bragging to the person who signed the checks, who would soon sign something else. Each post, each call, each humble brag was another brick in the story she'd chosen, her worth tied to a building and the people who ran it. It should have made me feel powerful. Mostly, it made me certain. Certainty is heavier and more honest than power. I could have stayed hidden longer, but to do what I wanted, I had to step into the light. The first person I had to face was Victor Hale, the chair of the club's board. He was old money without trying, crisp shirt, quiet watch, the kind of man who collects art and opinions. We met at a hotel lounge where the chairs were low and the music was soft enough that you could hear the ice settle in the glass. I wore a navy blazer and jeans, no glitter, no show. I put a single sheet of paper on the table between us. It had bullet points, simple and plain. He looked me over, curious. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Good," I said. "I don't want to be." I talked straight. "The brand is a promise," I told him. "Right now, your promise and your reality don't match. Guests come for something rare and get chaos. You have staff who are treated like furniture and members who act like teenagers with credit cards." He didn't interrupt. He watched me the way people watch a chessboard when there's one move left to spot. I didn't raise my voice or wave my hands. I told him the plan in plain words: slow down, tighten up, expect better, reward it. When I walked out, my heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. I'd given up a safe hiding place. I was now tied to the work with my full name. It was the only way to stand at the door and not be shoved aside. The meeting rippled outward fast. A short message went up on the company website and spread from there. It was like a light flipped on in a dark hallway. My phone lit up before breakfast. "Monarch Hospitality Group welcomes new principal benefactor, Miss Cecilia Reynolds, who will lead a strategic overhaul," the message said. It wasn't dramatic, it was neat, a sentence with a spine. Daniel called right away, warm and proud. "You did it, kid," he said. Natalie sent 5 fire emojis, then "remember to eat." Mom called with a half whisper as if someone might overhear. "We saw something online. Is that you, the restaurant lady?" "It's a new business venture, Mom," I said. "I'll tell you about it later." I didn't offer a tour or a timeline. A text from Ava popped up next. It was just a question mark. I could almost see her mouth hanging open through the screen, the math she was trying to do with no numbers to hold on to. I put my phone face down and took a breath that went all the way to my feet. There was a new pressure in the air, like the moment before a summer storm. The plan wasn't a secret between me and Natalie anymore. The city knew. The clock was ticking in a sound all its own, and it was counting down to Ava's birthday. Victor invited me to his office after the press release. It was lined with old books and photographs of people shaking hands. He gestured for me to sit in a leather chair that sighed when I did. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me, "about the promise." He pulled a folder from his desk and I saw printouts of public posts from people who were already members. Champagne poured on a bar like it was a joke. A hand gripping a server's wrist, caption after caption about causing trouble and getting away with it. I leaned forward. "This is what kills a place, Victor, not slow nights, not a bad season, this. When you let money excuse bad behavior, you train people to be worse every time they walk through the door." He didn't argue. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from loving something that's slipping away from you. "We have drifted," he said quietly. "We can fix it," I said, "but not with winks and warnings, with rules that mean something, with people at the top who actually enforce them. With a culture where staff know we will back them up." He studied me for a long moment, then asked, "What do you want this to be?" "A place for grown-ups," I said. "A place where the price of admission isn't a number but a way of acting. I want members who are proud to be seen following the rules, not bragging about breaking them. I want to make dignity the trend again." He cracked the smallest smile, like a man recognizing an old song. "You have a strong vision," he said. "I have a simple one," I corrected. "And it aligns with yours." I didn't wave my money at him. I didn't have to. I showed him a future he could be proud of, one that matched the way he talked about the place when he forgot to be careful. He stood, walked to the window, then turned back to me. "All right, Miss Reynolds," he said. "Let's do it properly. I will speak for you to the board." It wasn't a dramatic scene. It was 2 people agreeing that up had to be up again. I walked out into the late afternoon with a cool wind on my face and a list in my head. We would write the new rules. We would post them, we would say them out loud, and we would stand behind them when it got uncomfortable. And it would get uncomfortable very soon in a room filled with white roses. Natalie came over with her laptop and a bag of gummy bears, and we sat at my dining table like we were cramming for a test. Sticky notes crawled across the wood like bright leaves. We weren't writing a law book. We were writing house rules that anyone could understand and no one could wiggle out of. "What do you want the rule to do?" she asked. "Protect the place," I said. "Protect the staff. Protect the brand from people who think money is a free pass to be cruel." She nodded and typed. "Clear, simple, no loopholes." We kept the words short and strong. We made a list of the kind of behavior that rots a place from the inside: screaming at a server, trashing property, bragging online about breaking rules. Then we paused. "And this," I said, the words heavy but steady. "The public shaming of family in our spaces, on our property." Natalie's eyes flicked up to mine. She knew what I meant. She didn't ask why. She just wrote. We called it Clause 7B because the board liked things in order and it slipped neatly into a larger code they had ignored for years. The line read, "Clause 7B, membership and all associated privileges can be immediately revoked for conduct that harms the club's reputation, including the public demeaning of family members on any property owned or operated by the Monarch Hospitality Group." There were no flourishes. No long sentences to hide in. You couldn't miss it even if you were skimming. Natalie read it out loud once, then again, checking the rhythm of it like a singer testing a note. I brought it to Victor in a folder with only 3 pages. He read the clause slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't look at me at first. He looked past me like he was watching a movie of the club at its best and worst. "A character clause," he said finally. "We should have had this years ago. It keeps ugly stories off the front page," I said. "It tells staff we mean it when we say we'll back them. It tells members the rules aren't for show." He nodded and picked up his phone. "Emergency board call," he said, "this afternoon." On the call, someone tried to fuss over the wording. Victor cut him off. "It's clear," he said. "That's the point." We voted, one by one, all yes. I wasn't giddy. I was calm in a way that reached the bones. We had built the tool. Soon, we'd use it. That same afternoon, my email pinged with a glittering message that made me laugh out loud, one sharp note in a quiet room. It was from Ava. She had designed an invitation on thick, fake velvet paper and then sent a photo of it to everyone, including me. Gold letters curled across the image like frosting. "Ava's 30th at the Alistair. Dad pulled some strings," she wrote under it. "He convinced the manager to open the main dining room for me. It's going to be the party of the year. You should probably get a new dress or something." The absurd part wasn't the gold script or the rough edges of the cut paper. It was the idea that Dad had made a call and moved a mountain for her. In reality, Oliver had said yes because I had already told him the night would be smooth and fully covered. But let them believe Dad had power in a room he didn't even understand. Let them walk into the place thinking they owned it. The clock in my chest sped up. This wasn't just a date anymore. It was a set time, a guest list, a stage literally reserved in my name. She had chosen the audience and the spotlight and handed both to me with a bow. I didn't have to lure her anywhere. She was marching straight to the mark with her chin up. The risk grew teeth. Live room, cameras, families, the threat of mess and noise, but the plan snapped into its final shape with a click that felt inevitable. There would never be a better moment than the one she had so proudly arranged. I asked Oliver to meet me in a private room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fresh paint. He came with Grace Patel, the events director Ava had been bragging about online. They both stood with their hands clasped like I was about to give them a pop quiz. I kept my voice easy. "I'm the new owner," I said. You can learn a lot about people in the second after a reveal. Oliver's eyes widened and then settled, landing in a focus that told me he was already working through what it meant. Grace's mouth dropped open, then curved into a slow smile, surprise, then steady. "I'm not here to shake the room tonight," I continued. "I'm here to give you a heads up. There will be a special announcement during the toasts at Ava Reynolds's party. At a certain cue, the house lights will change and the screens will switch. I need your help to make that transition smooth. Grace pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Who's running the board? My associate, I said as Natalie stepped in from the hallway, her hair pulled back, a small case of cables in her hand. She'll sit with your technician and follow your safety rules. She won't touch anything without your exact nod. Grace and Natalie shook hands like two people who spoke the same dialect of calm. I turned to Oliver. I also need security to be ready to enforce a new club policy. You'll hear it announced. It may mean asking a guest to leave. It needs to be peaceful and quick. Oliver didn't flinch. Ethan will handle it, he said. He's the best I've got. We found Ethan Cole in a small office lined with monitors showing angles of the lobby, the dining room, the terrace where the city stretched out like a promise. He was tall and quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from confidence, not fear. He stood when I came in and waited to be told what mattered. We have a new conduct policy, I said. It allows us to revoke club access when someone publicly shames their family here. Tonight there may be a violation in front of an audience. If that happens, I'll need your team to escort the person out. No drama, no roughness. Just firm. His face didn't move much, but I watched his eyes. They softened a little when I said no drama. He nodded. Understood. We'll post 2 by the main doors and 1 by the terrace. We'll stay close, but not looming. You give the word, we move. I trusted him in an instant. Less because of the plan he laid out and more because of how he said it, with care, like he was guarding something worth keeping safe. We walked the route, tracing the line from the dining room to the elevator, the points where guests might rise or squirm. Every footstep felt like a drumbeat, a count to a song I'd written and couldn't stop now even if I wanted to. By then, there was no safer option left. I had put my name on the building and my word on the line with people who had done nothing wrong except trust me. If any of them tipped off Ava, the moment would dissolve into noise. If any of them got nervous and froze, the timing would break and the knives I had sharpened would just look like showy spoons. I had to step into the middle of the room and hold my breath like everyone else. The only way out was through. The night before the party, I didn't sleep. The city outside my window smeared into long lines of light, red and white threads pulled tight. I made tea I didn't drink. I set it on the sill and watched it steam, then cool, then fog the glass with a small, wet circle. My stomach rolled as if I'd swallowed the ocean. I walked around my apartment, touching things like I could anchor myself to the table, the couch, the corner of a frame. I tried music, I turned it off. I tried deep breaths. I ended up on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, knees pulled to my chest like I was 14 again. I pressed the heel of my hand against my sternum to quiet the hollow thump there. Somewhere in the hallway, someone laughed. A dog's nails clicked down the stairs. Life went on. Inside me, everything paused. What was I doing? The question was a knife made of air. I was about to stand up in front of a room and take a hammer to my sister's favorite mirror. I was about to use money and power the way people had used status and charm on me. A voice that sounded like Mom's moved into my head and made a nest. This is cruel, Cecilia, you're being cruel. I thought about turning back, calling Oliver and Grace and saying the announcement would be quiet and sweet, a simple thank you, a soft launch with no fight. I could still show the company, still reset the culture and let the family stuff rot in private where it had always lived. Maybe that would be enough, but maybe didn't steady my hands, it shook them. My fear had always been that I was too much when I asked for anything at all. Too sharp, too needy, too loud even when I whispered. It didn't matter that I brought home good grades, scholarships, a career, the rule was clear. I could shine in the dark as long as it didn't cast a shadow on Ava's show. This plan was the most selfish thing I'd ever designed, not because it put gold in my pocket, because it put a line on the floor and dared them to step over it so I could finally say stop in a voice that held. It was for me, for the 12-year-old in the gym with a dam and a broken heart, for the college kid who sent her own resume to 10 companies and told no one because she didn't want it taken. For the woman with whiteboards who was called crazy for wanting more than a neat box. I stood in my living room, a place I had paid for, filled with a couch I liked and a rug that didn't match and a plant that kept refusing to die. It felt like a hotel room. I had power more than I'd asked for. I had a plan that made perfect sense on paper, but I felt alone in a way that echo-tested the corners of the room. Daniel saw this as a smart move. He told me I was brave and exact. Natalie saw justice. She said it out loud and in text and in the way her hand stayed on my shoulder an extra second when she left. Neither of them had to live with Mom's voice in their heads or with the memory of Dad looking away because peace at the table mattered more than truth. What if I was just writing a new chapter in the same old book? What if the ending was still a family torn in two and a woman who made herself into stone so nothing could break her again? What if winning felt like nothing at all? I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Natalie's name. Even now, a piece of me wanted to put it down, to carry the fear alone like I'd carried everything else. But I was done doing this the old way. She answered on the second ring, her voice clear and clean like she had been waiting for me to call. "You're thinking of backing out, aren't you?" My throat closed. I made a small sound that wasn't a word. "Okay," she said softly. "Tell me what you're feeling." "I'm going to destroy her, Nat," I said. I pressed my fingers to my eyes until stars bloomed there. In front of everyone she cares about, it feels wrong. It feels like I'm becoming the thing I hate. "Wrong," she repeated like she was tasting it. "Sis, look at me." "I can't," I said, even though we were on the phone. "Then hear me," she said. "There's a difference between hurting someone to get high and letting someone feel the weight of what they've done. You're not pushing her downstairs. You're taking away a stool she shouldn't have been standing on in the first place." I leaned my head against the cool window. The city hummed. The tea had gone cold. "Do you remember your college graduation?" Natalie asked. Her voice shifted into that careful tone she used when she needed me to see something I kept stepping around. A picture flashed in my head: black gown, heavy cap, the itch of the tassel against my cheek, hope like a balloon in my ribs. "I remember," I said. "Tell me what happened," she said. "All of it. Start at the part where you thought they'd finally be proud." I closed my eyes. The hallway smells came back: garlic from a nearby restaurant, a hint of rain on hot pavement. My chest tightened, then eased, like the start of a storm that finally decides to break. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll tell you." I told Natalie about the heat that day, how the black robe stuck to the back of my knees while I stood on the stage with a fake smile locked in place. My name was called with honors. The dean shook my hand and the flash popped, and I looked out into the crowd and found them, Mom waving like she was the mother of the bride, Dad with the camcorder he never learned to use. For 1 second, I believed we'd take a photo on the lawn with my cap crooked and all their faces soft with pride. But after the ceremony, Ava pulled everyone into her orbit and lifted her left hand with a little gasp. A ring. Not even a special ring, plain, too big for her finger, but she held it like it was a trophy. She announced she was engaged to a man I'd met twice and never liked. My parents clapped like seals at a circus. Our dinner that night, which was supposed to be for me, turned into their first wedding planning session. The waiter asked if we wanted a picture to mark my graduation. Mom put her hand on the camera and said, "Why don't you take one of the happy couple?" Dad passed the camera back and asked for a shot of Ava and her fiancé under the string lights. My cap sat on the next chair like a hat left at a bus stop. When I asked for one photo, just one with my sash and the people who raised me, Mom's voice was sweet and hard. "Don't be selfish, dear. This is a big moment for your sister. You graduate every day. She only gets engaged once." They erased my biggest win because her finger was shiny. No one said the word proud to me. No one said my name unless it was attached to the bill. That was the night I understood what I could expect, nothing that wasn't taken first. I finished telling Natalie and felt the old bruise press against my ribs. Then I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I'm ready," I said. "We're done asking." The main course plates were cleared with a hush and the soft scrape of porcelain. Staff in black moved like a school of fish, quick and silent. A tower of champagne glasses was rolled in on a cart that gleamed under the soft lights. It was time. Dad stood up first, clearing his throat twice like it would shake a speech loose. He told a story about Ava's first day of preschool, how she never cried, how she marched right in and charmed the teacher. He said, "You've always been special, sweetheart," and held up his glass. Mom blinked fast and dabbed at her eyes even though nothing real had been said. She took the microphone and launched into a string of compliments that felt like old Christmas ornaments pulled out and hung up without thought. "You make us so proud," she said, like my existence in the room wasn't proof to the contrary. Then Ava stood, microphone in hand, the room already leaning toward her like flowers to the sun. She basked in the light, soaking it up. The videographer angled his camera and 3 different phones popped up around the table. She thanked her amazing friends and the best parents in the world. She spread her arms like a host at a game show. Her eyes slid down the table and landed on me. She let a smirk grow like she'd been saving it. "I also want to thank my little sister, Cecilia," she said, slow and syrupy, "for always reminding us that it's okay to be simple." A small laugh rippled. She paused to let it settle. She loved a pause. She loved control. "You can't let sentiment hold you back," she continued. "I have an elite circle now and I can't waste my time with people who don't fit." She held my gaze like a dare. "Honestly, Sissy, you're too poor and embarrassing to be here. Now get lost." The words hung in the air like smoke. A few friends laughed, tight and mean. A couple of parents looked away as if the wall had become very interesting. Mom's mouth pinched. Dad's hand went to his hair, that nervous habit he always kept for moments when truth might ruin a picture. I felt the blow hit, but it landed on a part of me that had been armored for years. I didn't flinch. I didn't drop my eyes or stand up or shrink. I set my hand flat on the table to feel something solid. The cheap bouquet of carnations next to my plate crinkled in the air conditioner's whisper. I found Natalie at the edge of the room, half hidden by a marble column, her hands resting on the tech board, her face calm as a pond. I gave her the smallest nod, the kind you see only if you're looking for it. The lights changed. They sharpened, washing the soft amber into a clean white that erased shadows and made everything clear. People inhaled at the same time. The big screens on the walls, which had been a loop of Ava at brunches and beaches, flickered. The photos vanished. In their place, a simple logo appeared against a dark background, Monarch Hospitality Group. A murmur ran around the room, a living thing. Ava froze with her glass raised an inch from her lips, her smile cracked and slipping. She looked at the screens, then at Oliver by the door, then at me, something like confusion starting to bloom into something like fear. Grace Patel stepped into the light like she'd been born there. She wore a simple black dress and held a second microphone that caught her voice and filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, crisp and warm at once, "we interrupt this celebration for a special announcement regarding the future of the Alistair and the Sky Lounge." Ava's head jerked toward her. This wasn't on her run of show. She hated surprises she didn't make. "As you may have seen," Grace continued, "Monarch Hospitality Group has begun a new chapter. Tonight, we'd like to introduce our principal benefactor and chair of the board, who has secured the future of this institution with a $200 million exit from her recent tech success." The room tilted. People shifted in their chairs, eyes searching. "Please join me in thanking Miss Cecilia Reynolds." The camera swung, smooth and sure, and landed on me. There was a heartbeat of silence, and then air rushed back into 100 lungs at once. I stood. The chair's legs whispered against the floor. I didn't sweep or wave. I didn't gloat. I nodded once to Grace, then to the staff around the room, then I looked straight into the lens like I was finally ready to be seen. If you listened closely, you could hear a fork slip from someone's fingers and ring on the plate like a small bell. Ava didn't move. Her eyes were wide, but she didn't blink. Mom stared at me like I'd grown another face. Dad's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Simone Park, who had always laughed a little too loud at Ava's jokes, went very still, as if stillness could make her invisible. Grace wasn't finished. She glanced at the screens and the logo shifted. Simple, dark letters formed new words. She read them as they appeared. As her first act, Grace said, steady as a metronome, Miss Reynolds has worked with the board to strengthen and clarify our conduct expectations, to protect the integrity of the Alastair and the Sky Lounge, and to honor the people who work here every day. Clause 7B lit up on the screen. The language was plain, no fog to hide in. I watched faces tilt up to read, lips moving along. Clause 7B, Grace read. Membership and all associated privileges can be immediately revoked for conduct that harms the club's reputation, including the public demeaning of family members on any property owned or operated by the Monarch Hospitality Group. There was no legal tone. No trick, just a door, clearly labeled. Grace continued, her voice even. The board has determined that comments made this evening by Ava Reynolds meet that definition. The name struck the room like the edge of a coin. A gasp came from someone near the middle. Another person muttered, "Oh my God," into a napkin. Therefore, Grace said, her pending membership application and all associated sponsorships are permanently revoked. Simone's head tipped toward her plate. Two of Ava's friends widened their eyes at each other, mouths tight. A couple of parents who ran companies for a living didn't look shocked at all, they just watched, measuring. Ava's face went white around the edges. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had nothing quick to say. Grace wasn't cruel, she was clear. Furthermore, she said, as per the terms of tonight's private booking, the host has violated the hospitality clause. The event is now terminated. We ask that guests vacate the dining room within the next few minutes. The words were simple. The result was a wave breaking, chairs pushed back, people reached for coats and purses. A few stared at me openly now, their brains catching up to the math. The woman in the simple dress, the one who had walked in with grocery store flowers, was the person deciding whether they would ever see the rooftop view again. The cameras were still rolling. The room was clean, bright, honest. For the first time, everyone saw me not as the quiet member of the Reynolds family, but as the person in charge of the house they had walked into. Oliver Grant and Ethan Cole approached from the side with the slow, steady steps of men who know exactly what they're doing. They didn't rush. They didn't loom. Oliver's hands were folded in front of him, his jaw set not with anger but with purpose. Ethan stayed a half step back, eyes scanning without showing a ripple. They stopped by Ava. Oliver addressed her with the kind of professional courtesy that can't be faked. "Miss Reynolds," he said, not unkindly, "we need you to come with us." Ava's chin jerked up as if someone had yanked a string. "You can't do this," she said. She laughed, a strange, high sound. "I'm the birthday girl." She swung to Dad. "Dad, say something." Dad stood slow, his napkin falling to the floor like a white flag. He looked at me across the long table where I'd been placed like an afterthought. "Cecilia," he said, his voice cracked. "What is this? This is a joke, right?" "It's not a joke, Dad," I said. I kept my voice level, clear. "It's a consequence." Mom's eyes darted between our faces, her lips forming words she didn't say out loud. She reached for Ava's wrist. Ava pulled away. "I'm not leaving," Ava said louder. A few people near the door flinched, not used to her voice without its usual polish. "You can't embarrass me like this in front of my friends." "I'm not embarrassing you," I said. "You did that yourself." Oliver didn't add a single word. He waited the way a good manager waits for the person to choose dignity. When Ava didn't, he nodded once to Ethan. Ethan stepped forward, not touching, just offering space. A hand indicated toward the archway in a manner that made it clear there was a path and it was time to take it. "This way, Miss Reynolds," he said. His tone had no edge. It'd wait. Ava opened her mouth to argue again, saw something in Ethan's calm that told her it would not work here, then snapped it closed. She turned, shoulders rigid, and walked. The videographer had the sense to lower his camera. Phones fell silent. The sound of her heels on the polished floor clicked like a metronome counting out the end of a song. As she reached the door, she looked back at me. For a second, not even a full breath, I saw the little girl who had cried in my room the night before the science fair. Then I saw the woman who had used that face for 20 years. I didn't look away. Guests collected their things with a kind of soft panic, like a party where the parents show up early. A couple of men came toward me, fathers of Ava's friends, faces suddenly polite. One offered a hand I didn't take. I didn't need it. Dad stood there empty like a man whose script had run out. Mom tugged at his sleeve, small and sharp. They left without another word. The room emptied, all that white and silver and the faint trace of expensive perfume left behind like a ghost. The staff remained, scattered in small knots, waiting for the next cue. I breathed in, long and steady, the way you do when a storm passes and the world is so clean you can feel it on your skin. The direct confrontation was over. The outcome was plain. The door she'd adored had closed, not with a slam, but with a firm, final click. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the key. The dining room emptied the way a tide pulls back, quiet at first and then all at once. The white roses looked tired, their edges browned, like they were relieved it was over. A few napkins lay folded on plates like small surrendered flags. Only the staff and my parents remained. Dad stared at me across the long table, his jaw tight. "How could you do this to your sister?" I held his gaze. "How could you let her do what she did to me for 29 years? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This is where it stops." He blinked first. Mom tugged at his sleeve, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen directed at me, fear, or maybe the understanding that I'd stepped somewhere she couldn't reach. They turned and left without another word, the click of Mom's heels falling in a quick, nervous beat. Oliver waited a respectful distance away. I walked to him through the soft glow of the chandelier and the scattered glasses that caught the light like little pools of water. "Please let the team know the party is over," I said, "but the night isn't." He nodded, steady as ever. "Tell the kitchen to prepare their best," I added. "Whatever the chef is proudest of, open the good bottles from the cellar. And please reopen the terrace. There's a new celebration tonight in my name." Oliver's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Yes, Miss Reynolds." I stood for a moment, listening to the shift. The heavy room lightened as the last of Ava's guests slipped out. In the quiet, I heard small sounds I love, the gentle clink of plates being stacked, low voices checking lists, the rush of water from the dish pit. The building took a breath with me. I wasn't a guest anymore. I wasn't an errand runner or a footnote or a shadow. I was the person who decided what the night would be. Grace found me by the door, the microphone in her hand like an offer. "Would you like to say something?" "I would," I said. I turned to face the staff who had started to tidy the wreckage of a party that never loved them. "May I have your attention, please?" My voice carried clean across the room, hands stilled. Heads lifted. Maria Alvarez stood near the far side, a tray balanced on one palm like it weighed nothing. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for your work tonight and every night. Thank you for the grace you showed while other people forgot you were people." I named the ones who had just stood with me. "Oliver, thank you. Grace, thank you. Ethan, thank you." I looked to the corner. Maria Alvarez, her eyes widened when she realized I'd read her name. 12 years here, right?" She nodded, speechless. "Thank you," I said simply, "for all of it." I gestured toward the terrace doors where the night stretched out in soft lights and cool air. The city hummed below like a quiet song. "The terrace is now open," I said. "Tonight I want the first guests to be you, all of you. Servers, bussers, dishwashers, cooks, runners, barbacks, every single person who made this place work. The food and drink are for you. Please be my guests. Sit, eat, laugh, let someone else refill your glass." A few people exchanged looks like kids who'd been told to run inside and found out the playground was theirs. Ethan's shoulders dropped a fraction, the hint of relief on a man who usually carries the weight for everyone else. Grace's smile reached her eyes. Oliver gave a short nod to his team, and the room shifted from work to wonder. Corks popped softly, not like explosions, but like sighs. The kitchen doors swung open, and a breeze of butter and herbs and heat rolled through, wrapping around us like a blanket. Plates glowed under silver domes. Someone put on music at the perfect volume, warm, low, alive. Maria set her tray down, almost like she felt guilty, then looked at me for permission. I lifted my hand in a little wave toward the terrace. She went, hand to her mouth, laughing into her fingers in disbelief. I followed them out but stopped just inside the threshold. The night air lifted the hair at my temples. The terrace lights twinkled like a string of friendly stars. I watched the staff take their seats, unsure at first, then settling, then calling to each other across the tables with the kind of joy that forms when someone sees you and means it. This was the contrast I'd wanted, the real rule I cared about. The person who used doors to hurt people was outside, facing the street. The people who made the room sing were inside, facing the sky. I stood by the door not to block it but to hold it open, the quiet gatekeeper of my own life at last. That night, I stopped fighting for a seat at their table and built my own. If you've ever had to draw a line that changed everything, I want to hear it. Leave your story in the comments. And if this spoke to you, subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next story.